All right. So, hey everyone, thanks for coming to this last minute addition to the Lunch Talk series. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Excuse me. After the December faculty meeting, where various students and faculty perspectives and concerns were shared about virtual strategies used during the pandemic, we were asked to host an open forum where faculty could discuss what has worked and not worked throughout the pandemic and give opportunities for students to be able to provide feedback in real time. So we want to first off thank the students who have shared their experiences already. And to ensure this meeting is effective, we're going to take as a starting point that the concerns presented by both parties throughout the faculty meeting were valid. And so we can focus on finding solutions to mitigate those concerns and make the best of a difficult situation. We'll be monitoring the anonymous question form as well as the chat box. If anyone wants to send in any thoughts, suggestions, or comments, you can also feel free to unmute yourself, I'm sure. The session will be recorded for any students or faculty that would like to watch us asynchronously. Since we don't have a lot of time, I'll go ahead and pass this over to Peter, since you're the one that reached out about this.
Yeah, thank you, Jenna, for being willing to, for Spectrum, hosting the faculty, giving the faculty an opportunity to talk amongst themselves in a fairly unstructured format about what worked and didn't work in a truly unique semester in many of our individual experiences. And to echo and channel what Rebecca Jones said at the COS faculty meeting, for many of us, how we taught our courses this semester was an experiment, and most experiments don't succeed. And if they did, probably should go back and question your methods. So the point is that we probably did some things this semester as faculty that did not work well. Some of us may have tried things at this semester that went very well, and it'd be useful to just talk to each other to see what we tried, what worked, what didn't work, to have a shared experience, because we're missing out on our office conversations, we're missing out on our hallway conversations, and there's just a lot of lack of opportunity this semester to talk to one another about ideas and challenges that we all face. So I will kick things off with something that I did not use this semester that I heard about was really successful. I mean, I know we as faculty, my train of thought. Anyway, yeah, so long story short, I hadn't heard of Jamboard. Oh, now I remember what I was going to say. So we all have we have different types of classes, right? Large introductory classes, we have the lab classes, we have upper level major classes. And so not everything's going to be effective for the of our unique individual courses that we're teaching. But one thing that I did not this semester that I heard about at the end of the semester was Google's Jamboard. And I'm wondering if anybody used that this semester and had any experience with that. But I heard from one faculty member in COS that was in their lecture course with equation writing on the board.
Can you say what that is?
So Google Jamboard, to my knowledge, is it's like a virtual white, and it uses some of the underlying collaborative editing of Google Docs, in the sense that multiple people can be editing it simultaneously, but it's more of a whiteboard. So for example, you could have 5 different groups of students working on a whiteboard problem at the same time, and then you could kind of zoom in on, at least this is my understanding, so I still haven't used it, zoom in on what each group of students is working on and kind of have a collective picture of where everybody's at working on a whiteboard problem at the time.
So I'll say I didn't use Jamboards, but I did use OneNote, which is now available actually through Blackboard. And so you can do kind of the same thing. It has a few syncing issues, which are kind of annoying. Sometimes it doesn't sync well. But when it does, it allows students to interact with the whiteboard at the same time. You can create pages. And the nice thing also relative to all the whiteboards in Zoom or wherever you're at, or Blackboard Collaborate or whatever, is that they're permanent. So they can actually do it synchronously or asynchronously. The problem I had having a large intro course was that most of them didn't have a good way to actually write on the boards. And typing doesn't work very well when you're doing equations. And I would probably require them to have some way to write on them in the future. But so that was my experience. I don't know if people have used Jamboards itself, but I tried a different technique for the same kind of thing.
That's a key question, right? So we want them to be able to write on something. There is whiteboard and Zoom, but in order to actually write something meaningfully, you have to have expensive equipment like iPad Pro. Is there any work around that? I suspect not, but
There are inexpensive tablet options that you can connect to computers.
well, the tablet that they actually gave us is not inexpensive, and it's not even useful at all, because you don't see what you're writing. You have to look at the screen at the same time write on the tablet. Very few people are capable of doing that if you don't see what you're writing. So to me, this technical issue is the most important one, particularly if students are expected to write something. Nobody has solution to that, I guess. Okay.
I found I got quickly very used to writing on the pad and looking at the screen. I didn't have any problem doing that. But none of my students had any tablets at all.
Did anybody else use those tablets that were provided by the department successfully? Because, okay, Ernie did, but anybody else? Because I used an iPad Pro and it was fine. Bob used it as well.
No, I used the tablet and it worked fine. I normally share my screen and with the students, and I write into a blank PowerPoint with the draw function, and that allows me to write more smoothly. When I write into a Blackboard, collaborate into the whiteboard, then there's a delay, and that kind of modifies the letters so you don't see them clearly. But when you share a PowerPoint or a Word document, in any document, it's also easy to save, because when in Blackboard Collaborate, when you write, then you can save it as soon as you move on to the next part. It's just lost. But in PowerPoint, you can actually write into it and then save it and upload the file so that they have it available. So that works really well. I got used to looking at the screen and writing on the tablet. That works really well for me.
I used Collaborate as well, and I would do screenshots of what I had written for that reason. Yeah. I also found it very frustrating that the erase button was right next to the ink color. And
I know.
More than once, I erased everything, not meaning to.
Yeah, that's, I think, why I really liked using OneNote, because it didn't do that. And the students could save stuff too. And there was no upload. It was just accessible to everybody as I did it. So my class notes were just online.
OneNote and Office 365 tool.
Mm-hmm. And the students can log in. You can have it connected to the class. It's the only technical glitch there was that students have to sign into it using their username at GMU, not at Mason Live. And they have to close anything that's at Mason Live, or it doesn't work properly, because it's only accessible through the GMU server, not through the Mason Live server, which is a little weird, but it ultimately worked. I mean, once we figured that out, it wasn't a problem. And the other issue was that it occasionally was slow to sync. And that caused more problems with having them try to actively work together than anything else, I would say. When it was being slow, they couldn't do things in real time as well. But then the permanence of it and the fact that it was just linked to my class was really nice.
Can I ask a question? Because I think the main problem for me is that with equations, I couldn't get people to participate, with the whiteboard, or it would take forever, just trying to write any kind of equation. And for me, it was fine because I have an iPad and I use something called Explain Everything, which I highly recommend to make videos like Khan Academy. I wondered if anyone explored the document camera option using the cell phone, where could students do something like that, where they just write on a pen and somehow did anyone do anything like that?
I ended up just having students tell me what to write. Having them write on the whiteboard with their mouse never really worked. And so for equations, I would just have them tell me what to write and I would try to transcribe it. That was, that doesn't allow student to student collaboration, but I haven't, I was in Jessica's class where we tried OneNote, and for student to student collaboration, it didn't really work that well. I think really the only option is for them, for that is for students to have either one of these cheap writing tablets. You can also get like a Samsung Galaxy that has a lot of the capabilities of the iPad, or a document cam. But and I tried doing the cell phone document cam, and it just it works, but it's a lot of effort.
Oh.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all.
I sort of talked with a couple of students, and they actually had some sort of stylus and notepads just lying around that they didn't even really realize. I only had one person take me up on the offer of using it, and it worked beautifully when she did it. And she just said that she had it in a drawer and she had never even tried it. I don't know what she was using. It wasn't iPad, it was something else she had. So maybe even if we float it to the students, that if they got some sort of stylus, they too can write on the board, and it would be helpful. Could be as simple as some communication at the beginning of the semester, not that they have to have it, but that it's useful. So we can't really require it, I guess.
Well, I mean, I think given the inexpensive ones, right, those are no more expensive than the clickers that we often have them require them to buy. And I was thinking, I'm not teaching the large lecture again in the spring, but if I were, I might have that as a requirement, because I think it's really important they be able to. And there are sort of $20 to $30 options, which doesn't seem unreasonable as a required device, given what we're trying to have them do.
Anybody tried these $20, $30 devices? Because the one that they gave us was $80, and I didn't like it anyway, but it was considerably more expensive than 20.
No, but I think just for the students to communicate, Igor, she just had it. Like I said, she told me, oh, I just have this. I never even tried it. Some cheap thing that she had. She pulled it out. She tried it, and she could write on the same whiteboard as me. And then, that was helpful. But maybe just, again, even just simply stating it, that it would be useful for them. I don't know about requiring for a small class, but useful if they had the option that we could communicate better. Maybe they would invest in something cheap, and then they can figure out what they want. Igor, I'm not talking about a solution for teaching, by the way. Because I think for something for teaching, like you've been talking about, the only thing that I found is what you just said, an iPad Pro works very nicely with Notability, and I can make all kinds of things, lecture notes, and post them on.
I ended up just writing everything that I would plan to say in tech, and then sharing screen. And then if anything comes up, just writing, scribbling on a piece of paper and holding it in front of camera, which is a very awkward solution.
Yeah. No, I would highly recommend. I mean, sorry for the expense, but the iPad Pro really does do a nice job mimicking a Blackboard, basically.
Yeah, I had success with it's like $150 Samsung Galaxy Note tablet. Works fine. It's not as smooth as the iPad, but it's pretty smooth. It's better than those $80 tablets that we were using. So yeah, I agree. We can tell students that they may already have something, and then also provide links to, different options that we've tried if they're wanting to invest. I mean, yeah, they pay for clickers, and they pay for those TI calculators, which are on the order of $100, and something usable is on the order of $100 for this purpose. So.
And we have a raised hand, Natasha.
Hi, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt the flow, but would there be some kind of way to help students in like with offsetting the cost from the department with something like that? Because while it's very useful, I myself was able to buy, you know, an older iPad and it was invaluable for me this semester. But I know, you know, in previous times, I can only speak for myself, but in previous times, $20 or $30 meant the difference of groceries for that week or not. And I know I'm not the only student alone in that. So would there be able to be some way to set up some kind of application or some way to reach out to the department just to kind of say, hey, you know, this tech would be really useful to me for my learning, but is there any way the department can offset the cost or buy, I don't know, like 20 of the clickers and then allow students to have them for the semester or something like that to kind of mitigate that cost on the student side?
There is a university fund for such things. I can't speak to the department part of it, but there is some ability to apply to the university for help.
I mean, yeah, I think there are some fund that the college and the university provides funding for that. But I'm, you know, as a chair, I'm willing to look into kind of funding some of those. But obviously, you know, it cannot be a iPad Pro type of thing, right? So, you know, maybe like what Natasha says, there's going to be some pot of money, and then maybe everybody can apply for like, you know, up to like about $150 or $200 for that, and then maybe we can try to trying to pay for a certain number of students for that.
The only comment I have is that we should probably try to avoid the mistake with this $80 tablet. And whenever we decide on something $20, $30 thing, student first to test it thoroughly with different people to make sure that student of different inclination ability will be able to use it, and it wouldn't be overly complicated or very low quality.
Well, we should. I mean, I guess that when we get the tablet, the first time there was like during the spring break last year, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was all done in a rush, and nobody knew about these mechanisms in advance. But now we should, if that happened, that we will be giving students some support, that we should make sure that this is money well spent, and this whatever you buy is really useful.
And the other difficulty too, I mean, I think especially for a student, I think depending on what the system they have, and then the adaptability might be different too.
Right, because some have Windows and some have Macs.
And some older version of Windows might not work.
Yeah, and there is even a small fraction of students who actually uses Linux.
Yeah,
a small fraction of students that called in on their cell phones too to lectures.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. So to shift gears a little bit, try to because we've already spent 15 minutes on this topic.
Can I make a quick comment before we do that?
Yeah, go ahead, Ernie.
I just wanted to say that I had a bunch of students in financial hardship, and I was using Mastering Physics, which is I referred some students to that COS support fund, and it was remarkably slow. It took about half the semester before they got an answer, yes or no. That was not helpful in that regard. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, it needs to be effective if we're going to refer it to students to it too. And I guess to sum everything up from what we've heard, like everybody's got their own unique solution, and no single solution is going to work well for everyone, given the differences in our own operating system usage and preferences for teaching. One of the things I struggled with a little bit this semester was interaction during class, especially if you have a less traditional lecture-based format. And when I did get interaction with students in my course, it was slower. It took longer to transfer, say, between breakout rooms or Discord chats, and it was just artificially floating between groups of students working was just much slower for me. And on top of that, and I know some of the other faculty express this, it's hard to lecture to an empty blank screen. And it is interesting to note here that every single one of the students has their cameras off now, and all the faculty, most of the faculty have theirs on, and we are not required, we can't ask students to turn their cameras on. That is definitely not allowed. But I'm wondering if anyone had any ideas on, or any successes that they wanted to share on just student participation synchronously, and any other challenges they had with student participation synchronously. No one wants to go first.
Well, I definitely had that problem in the labs of trying to get them to talk at the beginning. And one of the things I attempted was to give them some questions that were really, really easy to answer and had nothing to do with astronomy. So they would at least hear them. So even if I couldn't see them, I would hear their voices once. So I'd ask them questions like, what was the highlight of your week, or what are you worried about this week, that kind of thing, and then have them run through it. So with 30 students, I could do that. But even at that, I would go into the synchronous, into the breakout rooms, and I would find they weren't talking to each other. They had assigned each other pieces of the lab to work on, and they were putting them all up on Google Docs or something. And yes, interaction among the students was hard to get, and interaction with me was hard to get. I never did achieve what I wanted to do with them. So that's a negative.
I can say that the only thing that worked for me is when I I was basically pleading to see a face, and then eventually people felt bad for me, so they put their cameras on. And on the last class, I said, "This is so sad that we went a whole semester and I don't even know who you are." And so I said, "How about you give me a present and turn your cameras on?" And so then a lot of them turned them on, but it was almost like a kind of pleading that it was really hard and depressing to stare at a blank screen. But that
I had similar experience. I just said, "Oh, it would be really nice to see your faces for me to speak on." And I think everybody but one turned on their cameras. After that, for most people, it's not really a problem. For some, it might be, but most people were completely comfortable with doing that.
But Igor, part of that, I think, at least for me, I was in person and you were too. And so I saw the same people. And then
yeah, that is true. I mean, I switched to
and before I went up,
most of my class were face to face, and that was 100 times easier.
But before I went online, with everybody else, I told people face to face. I said, "Hey, when we go online, please, I want to see you." I begged them, just like Jessica said, but I looked in their eyes and I begged them face to face, so that when I went online, they did show their faces. And so Igor, you had that same advantage. So
yes, yeah, and we already knew each other well. And we basically started with having classes face to face and office hours online. And then during office hours, I said, "It would be nice if I could see you." And then most people didn't have problem with that.
Yeah, I just want to highlight a student contribution from the chat that it's hard for everyone to have their cameras on, since not all cameras have the webcams, and that could also be something else that we can think about with the department funds and everything else.
My only small success was with my asynchronous class, where I asked if they would like to do social hours, and I had quite a few respondents who said they would. We did, I think, 4 or 5 of them during the semester, and they would come on that, and I said, "If you can, please turn on your camera." And they were very willing to do that, because it was not, I think it was because it was more social, and they were talking to each other. And I did have one group who formed a group that stayed together, and they said they were going to continue to talk over the holidays and next semester. So they made some friends among themselves. So that's a whole different issue, but I think it's also really important to get that interaction among students themselves. And that was not as successful as I would have liked, but I did have at least 6 of them, I think, that were eventually participated a lot in that.
I would also like to point out that by nature of the cameras, I know that, again, I can only speak for myself and not everyone else, but I am not working from what is necessarily a quote unquote traditional environment. I don't have a desk, so I'm kind of just working amorphously around the house where I can in that day. And I know for me, that makes me feel unprofessional to have my camera on with some weird background. Maybe I'm sitting on a couch. I don't like portraying myself in that view, so I usually keep my camera off. And perhaps that is the same for other students, but I think you're right, starting it out with kind of a more personal touch kind of helps students feel more comfortable having their students on, have their cameras on, excuse me. Especially when it's a professor you haven't worked with before and you don't know them on a personal level. Oh, thank you, Professor Cressman. Now I feel a little bit better. I'm also on a couch. Yeah, but I know that that might be also a sticking point with people, is how they portray themselves as professional versus unprofessional, especially in a home environment now.
So I have a question. Am I the only one who taught asynchronously? And regarding that, I found that after insisting that the students use the discussion feature of Blackboard, it ended up working quite well. I had a number of students who really posted questions. They answered each other's questions. Discussions started, but it took a while to convince them to post their questions on there.
Yeah, I had the
we
same.
have.
Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, we have a student just raise their hand. So go ahead, Zach.
Well, I taught asynchronously to the Astronomy 111 course, and it worked quite well. The students interacted on the discussion board, so that worked really well.
Go ahead, Zachary.
Yeah, I work as an LA for Physics 103 this semester, and one of the things that me and my fellow LAs did was that we made a class Discord for students to post questions asynchronously, and we found that it is overwhelmingly supported. Even we did a survey at the end of the semester, and even students who said that they didn't it didn't help them in particular, they still recommended it for future classes just because of how frequently other students used it. We would get someone posting questions about once every other day or so, and between the four of us, we were able to answer questions within an hour or two, and the students liked having that a lot. So I definitely think having that kind of less formal asynchronous method to propose questions instead of just having office hours would help students a lot, because I definitely saw that it was very popular when we used it in our class.
Discord does seem to be what everyone at that age uses.
Yeah, it helped that a lot of this, since it's physics course for non-physics majors, a lot of the students for the class were coming from a computer science major, so they definitely had Discord for a good portion of them. I think out of the almost 100 students, we had like well over 60 on the Discord. So we had good participation and people used it quite frequently.
I'm wondering whether those discussions were mostly, how do I solve problem number blah, or was there more sort of content-based discussion also going on?
A little bit of both. So we made separate chat rooms for different topics. So there was one for homework questions where they could ask, okay, can I get some help on question X? But there was also one for labs in case they were having issues with writing up their lab reports or going through the labs if they had to do it asynchronously because they missed a day. We also had one for general questions for the course. So it's like, hey, do we have lab today due to the GMU change? Because I remember how in the middle of the semester we changed that one holiday from, I think it was Columbus Day to Election Day. And so there was a bit of vagueness in the whether or not we would have lab that following Monday or Tuesday, and so on and so forth. So we got a variety of questions. It was a mix of both categories.
I think it's also pertinent to add, because there are other Discord chats, like there's one for the physics department students as a whole, and there is a voice chat feature with Discord. So you can have a voice chat of, you know, up to, I mean, I've seen it with up to 20 students in it, and everybody could be studying together, and you can have live help with someone else, like talking to you about a problem. You can just say, hey, I don't get it, what's going on? And you can be typing in the chat while also speaking to each other. And that was really useful, especially since that kind, you know, it's more informal than setting up an official Zoom call or a phone call or something like that. You can just kind of hop in and hop out as you need to. And it's useful having all of those people with differing amounts of knowledge, because you have seniors there helping, you know, sophomores with, say, Astro 210, you know what I mean? People that have already been through it, helping those before. So it's very much like a real, as best of an online example of the physics lounge as we can get right now. I know that I benefited immensely from that chat, and I'm not the only one. Actually, Spectrum has a Discord chat as well for all of our Spectrum needs. And I know I was in Professor Plavchan's class, and he also had a Discord for the class, which was also highly useful. It's a good program to use. It's very, very helpful. There's even a LaTeX bot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another thing that occurred during the semester is there were some early on, I think it was like the second month in, we had some issues with Collaborate where a bunch of students couldn't connect. I think it was like about 10 students. And so what one of the other students did was they hopped in one of the voice chat groups and streamed the lecture to those students who couldn't get on Blackboard to access that. So that's another thing that can help, because some people might not be able to get onto Collaborate or just Blackboard in general, but they may be able to hop on their phone and watch the lecture from there. And I know between the four of us, for our LA office hours, some of us would host our office hours in Discord as well as Collaborate. So one of the things I did is in Discord, I'd stream the Collaborate office hours onto Discord. So if anyone wanted to hop on Discord instead of Collaborate, they could.
Ask a question to the students. So this semester, I kind of just assumed you'd use your own Discord. Is it better for the course instructor to set up a specific Discord for that course?
So the students have their own Discord with chats for each class as requested, so that people can get help with other classmates from that class. I would say it's helpful to have a professor have a separate Discord as well, because then you can have asynchronous help far more quickly, especially with the LaTeX bot. It's a lot easier to use LaTeX to type the equation that you're having trouble with than to try and put it in an email in that kind of weird helter-skelter way. But it also kind of depends, because I know for some people it's a little bit odd, because you're technically chatting with your students. Like, it is a chatting app, you know what I mean? For students, it's not really that big of a deal, because that's just how we communicate ordinarily with everybody. But I can definitely see how that can be a stopping block for some people. I would say that it would be highly useful if you're comfortable with it, but that's just me.
I'm comfortable. I'm just wondering, is that better than what I usually do, where the student will take a photo of their handwritten work and email it to me, and then I can write on that and email it back? Or do you think the Discord would be better for answering those kinds of questions?
I don't know that I'm the best one to answer that question, just because, like I said, I have my iPad, so I can send a PDF file of my handwritten work, and it's very easy to read and it's easy to mark up and send back. So for me, it doesn't really make much of a difference either way. For other students, it might be easier to do the Discord. One of the benefits to Discord is if someone asks a question in the general chat to you, and then you answer it, then if another student has the same question, they can just look back through the chat and see that you have already answered that.
That I like. Yes, that sounds good.
Yeah, because
go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, in my case, when we were getting close to finals, there were a bunch of cases where I had students asking the same question maybe 5-10 times, and I just go like, just scroll up about to X time, or I would just scroll it myself and just screenshot and paste back what I had already put down, to like,
Right.
that way I didn't have to do the exact same thing over and over, which I imagine you as professors with way more students than I am with just one class, I imagine you'd like that a lot. Since you guys are juggling what, 3-4 classes?
Sounds good. Thank you for that, those responses.
I used Piazza in my summer courses. I had in each of those courses 150 students, and Piazza is a tool that you can actually call on Blackboard and integrate into your course. And I offer the students that this is their platform. They can just do whatever they want and chat, and that worked really well. So they talked about their homework or so, and sometimes they had a question to me, and then I would go into Piazza and help them and answer the question.
And Shabia just raised her hand.
Oh, yeah, so this is great. I mean, I was planning to do this for next semester, so I think it's a really great suggestion, and it seems to really be something that the students will benefit from. But, you know, I think that I really, I don't know about other people, but I really want to make sure there's enough time to talk about testing.
Yeah, I was just going to go there.
Okay. Yeah, because I really want, there was a lot of complaints that I heard from students, and I think it's a really important issue, and I want to see what other people are doing, you know, and I want to really hear from students on, you know, what kind of testing should there be, and, you know, what is the best way of learning. And so I really want to have that discussion.
So let me initiate that discussion. That was a perfect segue, Shabita. Thank you. Obviously, one of the big things that changed this semester is our ways in which we conduct assessment. And I know some of the faculty here on the call have taught online classes previously and have included an assessment, and I definitely want to hear from those who have taught online classes regularly. As the cost faculty secretary, I was privy to a large amount of discussion about exactly this topic this fall. And there are the old cost faculty secretary meetings. We brought in the Office of Academic Integrity. We also brought in the Stern Center on how to change the ways in which we do assessment in this online environment. And the bottom line is this is something that a lot of people struggled with. And we heard about this from the students as well. There are other institutions that have, you know, relied on honor systems. I personally avoided tests altogether in my course, but I don't think someone who's teaching a 400 or 150 person class has that luxury. And there's been a lot of strong on assessment. So we can go ahead and kick that off. The last thing I want to also add to the previous conversation was all this stuff we're doing with Discord and chat, anything outside of Blackboard is technically not allowed by the university. The means by which to communicate with students, we are all in violation of FERPA guidelines. And I don't think anyone has addressed that at all. And we haven't raised that issue with the administration. So we can't require it, I guess. It has to be entirely voluntary on the part of the student. That's for my son to go back to school. So I'm going to turn it over to any one of you that want to talk about what worked and didn't work for assessment.
Okay. Zachary, go ahead, you just raised your hand.
Just briefly regarding GMU guidelines with the Discord, one of the chat, our particular one, we just linked all the stuff GMU currently has for responsible use of computing and honor code and all that kind of stuff. And we also establish rules separately for the Discord. And we basically said, for this Discord in particular, treat it like it's Blackboard in terms of rules and stuff needed.
Student initiated governance of the department Discord server? Is that what you were saying, Sam?
Yeah, it was initiated by me and my fellow LAs. The professor wasn't in the Discord, though she plans on being in it next semester for 104, since she heard from us how popular it was. But it's completely voluntary.
That's great to hear that there was student self-organized governance of how the Discord server operated. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and we also made sure to establish that people weren't supposed to message privately to each other inappropriate stuff like you wouldn't do on Blackboard Collaborate and all that kind of stuff, and said, if people do this to you outside of the Discord where we can't see it, let us know. We'll take care of it. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up briefly.
Well, that's great. I don't know who taught a large lecture course. I mean, Ernie, I guess you used Mastering Physics. How did you do your assessment? Was this what course was it?
It was 243, so 200 some students. The first test I did was in Mastering Physics, and I found that, I think I might have mentioned this before, that the distribution of grades was bell-shaped with a big spike at 100%, suggesting that people just Googled the answers. The second time, I basically picked problems from Mastering Physics, reworded them, but delivered the test inside of Blackboard. And then I got a more normal distribution, I think, because I reworded the problem, they weren't able to just Google them so quickly. The students really wanted to be able to go back to the problems that they had done and revise them. You know, backtracking is an option inside of Blackboard. They made a big deal about that one. I also asked, and on 2 of my tests, the students to write out a solution on paper, scan it, and upload it. And that was problematic because sometimes Blackboard accepts the upload and sometimes it just doesn't, for no reason that anybody of us could discern. So I had told the students that if it fails to upload, to email it to me, and then I was able to attach it. I don't know if anybody else had a problem with that. The file request was the type of question that I put on the test where you had to upload something. It just doesn't work in Blackboard 100% of the time.
Professor Oerter is raising his hand.
Yeah, so I was also teaching 243 and used a similar approach with Mastering Physics, and then also having them do a single problem written out and scan it in. I did not have as much problems with the file submission in Blackboard. That went pretty smoothly. I had a few people get tripped up. I think the main thing for me was just that if they had more than one page, the file submission in test mode only lets them submit one file. So if they didn't combine them into a single PDF before they uploaded, they were stuck, you know. The Mastering Physics, I did have some a lot more sort of technical glitches with it, where people kept saying they got kicked out. Now I reported these to Mastering Physics and they sent me detailed reports back. And it turned out in some cases what the students had done was to open a homework assignment, which is not allowed. It kicks them out of the exam automatically if they open a homework assignment. So that was kind of a pain, because every time somebody said, oh, my system kicked me out, I had to then go request a report from Mastering Physics and check to see if this was really a technical glitch that had happened, or if they had just opened a homework illegally. It was kind of a mixed bag.
So was that without the Lockdown browser?
That was without Lockdown browser. Yeah, I was doing this not, I mean, they go into Mastering Physics through Blackboard, but I was worried about using Lockdown browser because it doesn't let you go to other websites, and I wasn't sure if Mastering Physics would be counted as an other website, and so I didn't want to give an exam where nobody could take the exam because it was in Lockdown browser and it wouldn't let them go to it. But there was a fair number of cheating prevention options in mastering physics. You can randomize the numerical values in the problems, and I did write all my own problems after last spring when I tried to use the test bank and found that so many people got them all right. And you can also have the questions show up in random order, and I also limited their time to just the time that they would normally take the exam in class. And that way I figured they wouldn't have time to like compare answers if they were getting different questions, at different times. They couldn't just share answers with each other. So the combination of those things I felt fairly secure. The main thing is that people can just go into Chegg and submit their question to Chegg, and then you have to check that afterwards. It's always going to be a pain one way or the other, but that was my experience.
Professor Rosenberg, you raised your hand, and then Professor Bell after Professor Rosenberg.
Yeah, so I did something fairly similar for mine too. I did do my exams through Mastering Physics, but wrote all my own problems, and with at least some of them wrote variables into them, which is one of the nice things about mastering that you can do, such that they're not getting the same problems. And then for each of my exams, they had several long answer ones. But I didn't have, I actually used Gradescope rather than Blackboard for them to submit, which was kind of nice. The way you can actually, one of the nice things about that, especially if you do multiple problems, is that you can go through individual problems all at once. So, question 6 and mark all of those and then go to the next one, because you can assign question numbers to each of them. So once I figured that out, the first exam was a technical disaster because I made things way too complicated for the students. It just didn't work at all. But once we figured that out, I think it worked pretty well doing that. They'd scan them, they'd upload their written solutions. I had somewhat fewer students, right? I had 85 or so rather than what Ernie and Rob were dealing with, but it was still a lot of students to go through. Then again, I'm also about to have to file my academic integrity reports for the couple of students who have exactly the same exam. So it wasn't perfect, but I think for the most part, it worked pretty well.
Okay, I finally figured out how to raise my hand. So anyway, I have two different types of exams. So one in astronomy, the final exam in astronomy is an open book exam. And the book is online because we use OpenStax and you can access this basically through the web. Now, I also use Lockdown Browser. Yes, you can access another website through the Lockdown Browser. All you need to do is embed the URL into the exam and into the browser. So when you go to advanced settings, then in the Lockdown Browser, when you set up the Lockdown Browser, in advanced settings, you can just type in as many URLs as you want, and then you also put them into the instructions into the exam, and then the student can access that URL even if they are in the Lockdown Browser. So that worked really well. I also give them a possibility to contact me. I set up a course on remind.com. GMU doesn't have an account with them, but you have several courses that you can set up for free. So it's for the students, it's also free. And it's basically when I put in the URL, then they click on the URL and they send me a message and it goes to my phone. And then I can text them back and they get the answer as a message in this on this website. That is a way when they have a problem with the exam, or they have a technical problem, an emergency or so, they cannot move on with the lockdown in the Lockdown Browser. So sometimes they get a blank screen. That's a possibility to help them. And the other type of exam, I do all exams on Blackboard, but the other type is not open book. So it's closed book, closed notes. Those are the physics exams. I still put the remind.com as a possibility to contact me into the instruction in the exam, so that and in the lockdown browser, so that they can contact me. But I explain to the students that they are not allowed to backtrack the questions. So I normally tell them ahead of time that this is something that I do not allow because of cheating. So they need to get used to that before, and they never complained.
I can only speak again for myself. I have read reports that lockdown browsers tend to be problematic because of the way that they flag cheating. While it works in an enclosed environment, like if you were in a testing center, it can detect cheating normally pretty well. In this at-home environment where everyone has different home lives and families, and you can't reasonably tell everyone in your home to be quiet for 3 hours sometimes, it'll sometimes flag excessive noises cheating, even if it's not you and you're alone in your room and if you have thin walls. I mean, I know I live with 4 other roommates and I can never get them to quiet down even when I need to go to sleep. So getting them to quiet for a test doesn't usually work. So there tend to be some issues with lockdown browser. I can speak to what worked for me as a student with exams. Granted, I'm an upper level student. I've passed the introductory courses and I was a physics major to begin with. So my physics classes, it was never about going in and getting out as fast as possible. It was about going in and learning my foundations for the rest of my career. But speaking from that lens, what helped was either asynchronous exams. I had professors that made it like a take-home week-long exam or something like that, and they were able to make it just way more difficult because instead of it being like you have to remember it, you have to just go, it became much more about, do you understand the theory behind this problem? And it's not like a Googleable problem. Like I had to just know and make my brain work the way it needed to work to get the problem, and just go through the process myself. I also had professors that switched to doing projects. Again, I completely understand that's not a viable choice in giant lecture halls, but with projects that also helped, because again, I needed to know the theory, I needed to know what I was doing in order to complete the project to the best of my ability. And again, I know I sound like I'm beating a dead horse, but I understand this only works in upper levels, and at the lecture level, I have no idea. I can only imagine how difficult it is to make that operate. But I know that there have been studies showing that lockdown browser tends to hurt more people than it helps, because to speak frankly, if someone wants to cheat, they're gonna find a way to do it one way or another. And I've tutored enough people to see that in action and be shocked at what they've been able to do. So again, I can only speak to that. But I know that for people, especially in the upper levels, we're here to learn. We're here to be physicists and get our degrees and contribute to science. So we really don't want to cheat and then find ourselves in our PhD like, oh yeah, I probably should have learned that if I didn't go on Chegg. That tends to not be a common problem up at the top. And Zach, you have a raised hand?
Yeah, to just go off of what you already stated, we used a lockdown browser for 103 and for the final, and one of the issues, there are a lot of issues with having it for an at-home basis, like you stated before. One of the issues students had was one student, the router went kaput, and so it locked them out halfway through because of that. And I don't know exactly what the professor did to resolve the issue, but I remember seeing the student panic because up until that point, they'd been a straight A student and they were just in utter despair at the fact that they couldn't continue the test because the router died. And so they were messaging me and the other LAs on their phone going like, hey, I know I'm not supposed to be on my phone, yada, yada, XYZ happened, I can't continue my test, panic, 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 and so on and so forth. So I've just noticed that Lockdown Browser tends to have a lot of issues, like Natasha said, for the at-home environment. It's good for when you have a controlled testing center, but when you have a chaotic at-home environment, I think, like Natasha said, it hurts more than it helps.
Thank you. And Professor Rosenberg, I see you have your hand up.
There we go, sorry. Yeah, so even in a large class, I'll say, I mean, I chose not to use a browser because of the problems I'd heard about it. And I mean, I just made the decision to make the exams open book, right? That the idea was to design questions that, you know, even if they have their book, they have to think about and do. And I didn't have a problem with that. I mean, that certainly made that part of it easier. Not that there weren't other issues. There were plenty of other issues with exams and cheating, but I think designing open book exams, even at the lower levels, works. I also wanted to share an interesting thing that I had thought about, but was way too intimidated to try with the number of students I had. But I was just this couple of days ago talking to one of our math colleagues, and he actually did it for a similarly sized math course for Calc 3 with 80 plus students, having done oral exams. And so they had, I can't remember the number, 7 or 8 of them, and you had to pass most of them, right, to get it, and different depending on how many of these oral exams you passed. You got whatever grade you got, which I thought was really interesting. I at the very end gave them an extra credit assignment where they had to go back and redo one of the questions that they had not done well on in video form and explain it for extra credit. And it was really useful to see because it forced, they actually turned on their cameras because I told them they had to for the video. So I saw all the faces of the students I hadn't seen all semester, which was kind of nice. But also having them interact in that way. And I was impressed to hear that it could be made to work with 80 plus students. I'm not sure it would work with 200. That might kill you, but certainly for the smaller classes, I think it's something to consider as an option where, you see them have to explain it. You don't have to go through sort of some of these other issues.
So Professor Bell, I see your hand up, but just real fast, just as a clarifying question to Professor Rosenberg. When you say explaining through the problem, is it like a mathematical problem where you have to reach a numerical answer, or is it more of like, here is the situation, how would you go about it? And then you say, oh, I'd use this theorem and this equation, yada, yada. So
I don't know the details of the Calc 3 ones. I mean, I assume they're the kinds of questions they normally have students do. For the one that for my intro physics class, right, it was their standard long answer exam kinds of questions, part A, B, C, and would find the force of a moving charge, on another moving charge due to the magnetic fields created, that kind of thing. But setting it up and writing out the equations and explaining how they got them. And it was really nice to see them do it. Many of them did it well, not all of them. But it really sort of showed which ones could explain things and those who not as well. And most of them managed to do it in the end, having the time to sit there and think about it and work through the problem.
Very interesting. I haven't heard about that. Thank you. Professor Bell?
Yeah, I just wanted to say regarding the technical difficulties that many students or that some students have during those exams, I prepare them before that. I said, when you have a problem, do not panic. Contact me, let me know that your browser shut down and that you cannot continue with the exam. And then I go into the exam of that particular student and I create a separate exam by just extracting the questions that the student had not yet answered. And then the student can continue with that exam and finish it up. And then I add those two scores together. And that worked really well. I had 300 students in the summer courses, and it was not a problem.
All right, well, it's 1 o'clock, and I know a number of you might have to get going, but I think we could continue this conversation for anyone that needs to stay. And thank you all for participating in it. What the final question I'm going to pose is, I guess, was this useful? And two, were there anything that you're just burning to talk about that either was an absolute disaster or train wreck, or was incredibly well? And I'll offer a train wreck, which is having a first grader at home has made things incredibly tricky. I feel bad sometimes that my students pay for tuition and then they spend some of that time learning about Beyblades and Pokemon during lecture. Just, it's been rough. So any other thoughts from others on that?
Can I say something quickly? I would like to hear just brainstorming from students on what they would do if they were the professor. I'm liking this innovative idea of video recording solutions, projects, collaborative workspaces. How would you design this? And some of you here and some of you left, but have been in my classes before. So I want to know. So maybe like, and it's definitely different for the different levels. So maybe we should have different kinds of discussions for different level classes.
Oh, and Professor Rosenberg, can we also ask what they worked well? Okay, so speaking as a student, I know that what really worked for me was feeling able to talk to my professor. And I understand that there's only so far that can go in an online environment, but I know that I felt most comfortable in classes where I had previous interaction with the professor, or the professor made a point of, addressing this global situation we're all in. We all know how we're living. We all know what the global situation is, and it's stressful, and everybody has a lot going on right now. But I know I felt more comfortable when it was like the class began with like, hey, I hope everyone's doing okay. We'll get to work, but feel free to message me if you need any help or outside or whatever. And again, I know there's only so far that can go. What also really worked for me was, like I said, projects and asynchronous exams, especially if they were open note, because that really actually tested me. I felt like I really had to dig deep and figure out what I had learned over that semester, especially if I couldn't just pull it straight out of the textbook. Like, I had to know what I did. And if I didn't, then that was on me. If I were a professor, and again, this is speaking optimistically, and in no way, shape, or form in a pandemic society, which I can't even believe happened, and apologies for all of you to have to live through that, but I would probably steer away from exams as best I could, or at the very least make more of the weight of the class homework. Since you can self-correct with homework, you can get feedback and operate with it. You might have one bad homework assignment, but the chances of having 13 bad homework assignments, if you're learning, is slim to none. Whereas you can have a bad test day, especially now when any given day you might wake up and have some bad news, some real bad news. So that's probably what I would say, but I would like to say that, everybody's efforts is very much appreciated with what has happened this semester. And you know, having more discussions like this is actually probably going to be the most useful thing, to feel that students can communicate to faculty and vice versa, and work together to move forward. And oh, Professor Rosenberg, you put your hand down. Okay. If anyone else would like to comment.
Sorry,
You
I
can
was
go
just
first.
I was just going to say, I mean, it was sort of the question I asked in the chat, which was also to hear from all of you about sort of, and you were starting to answer that, but in terms of interacting and what really worked, what did you enjoy? You know, we know not all of this was easy, but if there were things that worked well, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, to tag on to what Natasha already stated, and I highly agree with what she said so far. Just having these discussions in general just makes it feel like our voices are being heard, because we know that this is kind of turning everything on people's heads with being put in something that would normally be done in person, which we're all used to suddenly being online. We all know that's a shift that all of us have to do. And so, like I said before, one thing I noticed is that students really liked having that ability to interact with one another in the Discord we use for 103. Sometimes students would help each other before any of us LAs would notice. And so the students would be working together on homework questions, which was allowed. Now, I will say, generally speaking, things like the lockdown browser, while I personally have not experienced it, I have yet to hear good things about it from my fellow classmates. And while I understand that the take-home test method is better used at the higher levels, since there are fewer students, so that it's easier to go through each individual test and mark them down, rather than having a huge lecture hall. I'm not entirely sure what would be best for the big lecture hall ones, but by and large, I believe that having some asynchronous take-home method would be most popular for the higher level courses. Just because for me personally, this semester, particularly between my classes, one of the things my differential equations class did is that during our time period, we would get one or two assignments on Gradescope, and we had to complete it in a certain amount of time during that time period. And while I liked that for the homework, I didn't particularly like the fact that any redo attempts were also stacked in that time, because then you would be pressed for like an hour and a half to do potentially up to 4 to 6 assignments that each could take about a half hour to do. And so those are just some things that I noticed. By and large, I benefited the most with the asynchronous homework and testing methods, like in Physics 305 and 334. By and large, those went really well with the asynchronous learning method, with having about a week or two to do homeworks. And for 305, our professor gave us, I think it was from 8:30 to 1:15 to do our final, and that went by pretty well with open book take-home tests. Because like Natasha said, that really makes us think, and even though it's open book, we still have to make sure we know how to use the theory, we know the knowledge that we need to complete it. But that's just my stuff as a student, and also as an LA who helped the professor with setting up labs for 103.
Thank you, Zach. Professor Oerter, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I don't know if this is off topic or not, but one of the things that you know, it really bothered me was that none of my students put their cameras on. And I'm noticing that in this chat right now, pretty much all the professors have their cameras on and the students have theirs off. And this absolutely drives me bonkers. I'm just wondering, since we've got a couple here, can you explain this, folks? I mean, I'm talking to the students here. Why don't you want to put your camera on?
So I can only speak for myself here, but I know that I'm very much a compartmentalizing person. So whenever we used to go to campus, I was always very good at, like, I would go to campus and that was where all my work happened. I was professional there. It did not matter what was happening in my personal life in that moment. I was on campus, I was professional. That line is now blurred. And I know for me, that makes me feel very insecure putting my camera on, knowing that I'm not in the professional environment that I like portraying myself in, especially to professors. So, I mean, I can just speak for that being it for me. It's not always the case for everybody. I know when I visited my family once over the course of this semester, then I was in a bigger house and it was always loud and there were people walking behind the camera all the time. And that was also something where I was like, well, I don't want to be showing that when I would really rather be viewed as professional in this moment. So I just kept my camera off. Because, you know, my little brother running in to tell me what he just did in Halo is not a great look. So I can say that that's why, for me, Professor Weingartner, I see that you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say there's been a lot of professors in this call saying they are unhappy not seeing faces, but I don't care personally. I mean, it never bothered me not seeing the faces. I think that if I can hear your voice if you ask a question or read the chat, or if you send an email with questions or with photos of work, that's all sufficiently interactive for me. I never really had a problem with not seeing your faces.
I didn't see which hand went up first, unfortunately, because they all went up kind of at the same time.
All right, I'll jump in. We did actually, Dr. Oerter, we did actually discuss this at the beginning of the session. I just have a proposal. So for me, I was okay with it too. I mean, I did notice that the students generally don't want to. And just as a reminder, we absolutely cannot ask students to turn on their cameras in lecture, or you can't require it. I'm wondering if we could require some, I mean, but it's hard talking to a blank screen. It's just totally different experience. And I'm wondering if we could have or request students to have like their student profiles or like their student IDs or some type of picture on Zoom. So at least we're looking at faces, even if they're static and not interactive. I wonder what people think about that.
But before we get onto that, if I can just follow up with what you just said, because you said we can't require it, and yet the lockdown browser with the video monitoring does require it, and that seems to be allowed. So there seems to be some tension there between yes, we can require it, or no, we can't require it.
I think exams are a different situation, but outside of exams, you cannot ask students to turn on their cameras.
And why is that?
I'm trying to remember the reason, but we went over this in a College of Science faculty meeting earlier in the semester. But there's some, I mean, it has something to do with the students don't need to be forced to share their home environments with you, with faculty. It's if they're not comfortable doing that, it's entirely within their right. It's different when you're in person on campus, but asking them to share their private environments with you is not allowed according to what I recall. I don't remember exactly why, and I can dig into that from earlier in the semester to see if I can get you an answer.
Can I quickly jump in here? I talked to the Stern Center about this because I found it very difficult in the lab environment where I'm normally used to see what students do. And then in the lab, I just saw blank screens. And that gave me the feeling and the impression that the students weren't working at all and that they were doing something else. Only when they sent me pictures of their circuits or so, I could say, well, they have done something. But I did not know, were they really spending their time on the lab, or because they always needed longer than the normal time that they would need in the face-to-face course. So I didn't know, and I know there are 3 students now, 4 that were in my lab course. It was very difficult for me, and because it gave me the impression that they were not working. And we cannot. So I talked to the Stern Center, especially because of the lab environment, and they told me that this is not a GMU policy. There are other universities that require the students to turn the camera on in those courses, but GMU does not have this policy, and therefore we cannot require it.
Thank you. Zach, I saw that you had your hand up. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, so just to repeat what I said earlier, not all students have cameras. So me in particular, I'm only able to have a camera on whenever I hop on a Zoom call via the app on my phone. I don't have one hooked up on my desktop, which I'm connecting to through the call right now. And so that's kind of why I don't have a webcam on, but also too, I am almost entirely limited in terms of quote unquote office space to my bedroom, which I'm not quite comfortable having that constantly on, sharing my messy room. And so I'm fine with, particularly when it comes to the lab environment, I'll hop on, if it's on a Zoom call, I'll hop on my phone and I'll share it that way. Or if it's through Collaborate, I'll find another way to get in contact with the professor, like via email. But personally, that's my reason for why I don't have a camera on. A, because I don't have one on my desktop and only on my phone, and B, I just don't feel comfortable showing my room and broadcasting that.
Just to address what another student just put in the chat, that they're fine putting the camera on if they know in advance that the professor wants that, but if most other students don't have their camera on, then they feel awkward being the only one with theirs on, which I can corroborate that point. And sometimes if you log in early in the morning before you've gotten yourself ready, you feel that no one needs to see you just then, which again, fair point, totally understood. I can speak to reasoning why things take longer than they would in an in-person environment is, again, I can only speak for myself, but because of my compartmentalizing nature, I find it hard to get into the groove when I'm at home, especially when there's other distractions. People need me to help with something else. Someone just came and they need help putting away the groceries. And I'm like, well, there's these constant interruptions that you don't have when you're in the physics lounge or you're in a classroom and no one's interrupting you unless they're interrupting you with, directly related physics work. So it does take longer and it is a little bit harder to get things done, but those things are getting done. And if students don't have their camera on, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not working. It just means they're working at their own pace in the way that they feel comfortable. And like Zach said, a lot of students are operating out of their bedrooms right now because that's where their space is and that's where they can, a space they can reasonably call their own. And sharing that space is, I concur, is uncomfortable to me. Especially now that I'm not in a dorm room anymore where everything is in the same room and I'm just like, well, this is just where I'm at. Yeah, so I think that's I agree with that. Will?
So just to weigh in on the webcam issue, as someone who's both a student and teaching classes, I find it interesting that whenever, I was teaching, I would always, or pretty much always, put my webcam on, but whenever I went to my class, I would always have it off. And I think the reason for that is just because everyone else had their webcam off, and it just felt weird, being the only person with my webcam on. And another reason that I think's very valid for students not wanting to turn their webcams on is we're all stuck at home in our rooms, and sometimes we can go a couple days without showering and we don't always look the best, so it's a kind of natural not to want to put your ugly face and greasy hair in front of a camera for everyone else to see. There's also the issue of people who have, messy rooms and home environments, and that could just be a little embarrassing to share for some people. So I agree in general with the GMU's policy to not make it, enforceable to require students to have their webcams on. I think that should be on a completely voluntary basis.
To build off of that, I fully agree with you. And not only that, I think that it actually makes it easier to have webcams on for other outside purposes. I know that there have been times during class where I've gotten calls from, like, say, oh, bye, Professor Rosenberg. I've gotten calls from, like, my mother, and I know that there's a family member that has COVID, and I immediately take that call. Whereas in a classroom, in person, again, there's usually not a pandemic going on where any call might be a really bad one. But I would always take that call, and being able to have that freedom to still be in class and paying attention at least long enough for me to know whether there is an emergency going on makes me feel a lot better. And if I need to constantly put my camera on, camera off, that kind of thing, I feel uncomfortable alerting everybody to the fact that there might be something going on at home in that moment. I feel like that calls more attention than just having my camera off and doing what I need to do. But like I think it was Scott said, if a professor says that, I would really prefer people have their cameras on beforehand, like during the initial email to the class, at the beginning of the semester saying, hey, I'm a person that prefers this, but it's your call. I would feel more comfortable doing that, knowing that other students also received the same memo. So that hopefully I'm not the only student with my camera on. But yeah, that might be a good way about it. Or like Peter said, putting a profile picture so it's not just a name on a blank screen and you can see the person behind the voice.
I have just a quick question for the students. And my question would be, how would it feel if the professors get their camera off? Just wondering, because we face some of the same issues. There are days when I just as soon not turn mine on. Would that feel uncomfortable though for students?
At least for me, not really. Mostly because, like I was saying before with Discord, we only use voice chat. It's not video. So I'm in a position constantly where I'm learning from other students and I can't see them. I'm just hearing their voice. And obviously it would be very hypocritical for me to be like, no, professor, I must see your face, but you cannot see mine. I wouldn't mind that. If there's something that a screen needs to be shared, then most of the time I'm not even looking at the professor's face anyway. I'm looking at the screen that's being shared and not really paying attention to video.
Yeah.
But
yeah, if the professor doesn't
been in on a class that was being given in a different department, and I was very surprised that the professor never turned his camera on. I mean, I wasn't there every day for the whole time by any means, but for the time that I was there, he never had his camera on. I will also say that I was often having poor connection according to Blackboard, and I had to I had to turn my camera off just in order to be able to continue to talk so they could at least hear my voice. So I didn't always have my camera on either, but I appreciate you revisiting this issue. If you did it already, I apologize for bringing it up again.
No, it's perfectly fine. And like Natasha said, a majority of the time when professors are sharing screens, the shared screen is the main thing taking up a majority of the board, and that's what we're focused on. Almost for like 95% of almost all my lectures, I did not pay attention to the professor's camera once they started sharing screens or sharing something, because the main focus is now the shared screen. And also, as someone who grew up in the age of Khan Academy, I'm already somewhat used to hearing a magical voice that writes stuff down on the screen. But yeah, it's like it would be very hypocritical of us if we say, yeah, yes, we can have our cameras off, but no, you can't. It would just be.
I will correct my earlier statement. The only way that I would say that yes, I do care if it's an accessibility issue. I know for other students that are deaf or hard of hearing, this has been an especially difficult transition. So if there's a student in the class that has some kind of issue like that, then yeah, I would say that the professor needs to have their camera on for the sake of that student, for lip reading, for whatever they need to do. But that's, a case by case scenario that's not applicable in most cases. But that's the one time where I would say, yeah, a professor should have their camera on. And Professor Satyapal, you had your hand up, and then Professor Weingartner.
Thanks, Natasha. I have to go, and this was so helpful. Yeah, I hear you. I don't want to put my camera on, but I feel like I'm teaching better if people can see me. But before I go, I really got a lot of good takeaways here, and the number one thing that is going to take work for me is the Discord. And if I need help, would anyone here be willing to help me? I already did.
Yeah, I've already volunteered to help my professor set up the one for 104 in the fall. I am more than willing to assist other professors as well if before the spring semester starts up. I'm more than happy to.
Thank you guys, because I'm sure I'm doing it effectively, and I'm doing it and not violating any rules or whatever. So
yeah, that's not a problem. Most students know how to work Discord. There's some students that know how to work it with a little bit more proficiency, like how to add bots, which is really cool. Like I said, you can add a LaTeX bot where you can type in LaTeX and it'll make it into the equation you want, or you can even add ones that play music. It's fun. But yeah, sure, reach out. The Spectrum website also has a connector, like the email or whatever, and all of the Spectrum users are proficient with Discord, so you could also reach out that way. But yeah, anybody would be willing to help. I promise you.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you guys so much. I'm gonna leave now.
Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.
Look at the outside, it's snowing. It's so exciting.
Yeah, it's coming down by my place. The dogs have been frolicking in it.
Yeah, and that's one bad thing, no snow days. At least that's what makes
Yeah, I was joking in the Discord that of course we get the one snow day after the semester ends. And then all the students who are in research projects is like, for you maybe.
Yeah.
Make a snowman your profile picture.
But yeah, to go back towards that profile picture thing, that suggestion, I'd be more than willing to go with that, where we just have the picture on our GMU IDs put up, or any other picture that just has our face on it. I'm more than willing to do that. That way you can at least have some kind of face to associate with the voice. That I believe students would be open to that, since it's not all that hard.
Yeah, I believe so too. Maybe not the student IDs, because like you said, that's 3 years old, and I don't need to revisit the mistakes that I was making like 3 years ago. But yeah, definitely putting up a profile picture is not a hardship for most students. We have enough social media profiles with our pictures on them anyway, so yeah, that should be fine. Professor Weingartner, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, nothing important. I was just going to say, I know where you're coming from, not feeling comfortable showing your space. Like, I'm fortunate to have a home office where I'm sitting right now. But if you notice, everything's blank that you see behind me. I took all my stuff down before the pandemic started, because it's personal stuff. I don't want people seeing it, so I get that. And then I use my iPad. So I always put my camera on to start my class, so everyone can see me and know that I'm here, and engaged. But then I turn it off because I put my iPad down flat to write during class. And then all you see if I left the camera on with my bald head is I'm leaning over the iPad writing. So that wasn't so great. So, so that's sort of the approach that I decided to take to it.
Yeah, that's great. I think, like Becky said in the chat, it's just about, kindness and being sensitive to other students and what their environment may or may not be in that moment, which is obviously just something that we're all going through right now, is recalibrating how we interact with people that are, colleagues and professors, and how these relationships have to operate when everybody's at home. But I think having more discussions like this are certainly going to be the most helpful thing, is having open discussion between faculty and students.
That's a good plug for next semester, Natasha. So will Spectrum be revisiting this professional development lunch talk series in the spring?
Yes, we are. Thank you for bringing that up so that I didn't have to. But yes, we will be bringing that up. We will be doing it again. Spectrum is actually having a planning meeting tomorrow to discuss what we're going to be doing going forward in the fall semester. And as always, we're always taking suggestions from anybody about what they want to see covered or what meetings or, anything. But yes, we do plan on revisiting this because the survey that we put out got, very good responses and plenty of responses from students. And we were kind of surprised by how well that worked, to be honest. And it was a good conversation opener, clearly.
Well, we managed to convince the entire College of Science to put out the same, or a variation on that survey. So yes. I have received an email from me because of the initiative that Spectrum took into the we're also polling all the College of Science faculty and students, and we're actually going to share that in the January faculty meeting, the results of that. And it'll be interesting too to compare faculty versus student responses on that. I learned a lot in this meeting too, which I didn't expect to necessarily, because I'm mostly modern with technology, but the big thing I didn't think of was the video assessments. Just having students record videos as almost like an oral exam, but asynchronous, is an interesting thing that will work in some of my smaller classes.
Yeah, I really like that idea. I know that I'm very much someone that can explain the way my brain would think through a problem. And then when I go to do it, I'll make an algebra mistake that makes me do 3 extra pages of algebra and then still get it wrong. Which most professors will be able to see that I had the theory down. I just can't add sometimes for some reason. But yeah, I thought that was a really good idea. I'm not sure how it can be implemented, but.
And Joe, now I'm curious what your personal effects are.
It's really just like, personal photos and stuff that I don't want to share with the whole world, It's not a big deal or anything, but.
For the first 3 months of the pandemic, I did not have a desk, and I was lecturing from a couch chair on a laptop. Yeah, so I certainly, that sucked. I now have a desk and a desk chair at home.
Peter, I think you should work those Beyblades into your physics lessons. You can do some rotational dynamics. You pull out the Hot Wheels and make some energy conservation tracks.
Honestly, they are awesome. I mean, the fact that kids love them and it teaches them all about conservation and momentum, and
and it'll be nostalgic for a couple of students too, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think Beyblades are already like. I think the current generation of college students, some of them did grow up with Beyblades.
Possibly,
yeah, I did.
Yeah.
They were around.
I remember back in my day when they first came out.
I have no idea what you're talking about personally, not a clue.
No kids, Joe? No boys?
No.
Yeah. So specifically, Beyblades are these. I have one on my desk here. So, because there's like 20 in my house. So there are these toys. They basically are tops, right? They're spinning tops, and you put them on a device that spins them up, and they drop down into the spinning area, and they battle each other. So they clip, they collide. And the latest generation of them, which the first generation didn't, is they have all this flare, right? And when they hit and they catch on each other, and they're spinning so fast you don't see this, they pop apart. That's called bursting. But yeah, there's a huge amount of mechanical physics in that. And you're right. If I ever have the opportunity to teach Physics 1 or Intro Astronomy, where we go over conservation angular momentum, I will incorporate that into my lecture. I did use a spinning top when I taught general astronomy. I had a little spinning top that made noise when it spun and played a song. That was always a good hit for a demo. But yeah, there's a ton of rotational physics in here, which is really cool.
I mean, you would get people paying attention. I remember losing many a snack to Beyblades in elementary school. So you would get a lot of people needing some redemption while learning about physics. So
I'm sure you could come up with a lab using Beyblades. All right.
I finally have an excuse to dig those out of my closet before my nephews nick them from me.
You know, my son, though, I mean, he doesn't really think about the fact that it's just a spinning top, right? I mean, I'm overanalyzing. He just thinks about how, like, they're, you know, sometimes they're just spinning around each other and they're avoiding confrontation. And when they do actually slam together, because it's spinning so fast that you don't see the individual collisions. But it is pretty neat. And of course, yeah, the weight really matters. And, you know, so if they collide, the bounce will go pretty much as the mass ratio of the two bays. And yeah. All right. I think we're done. Thank you to Spectrum for hosting this, and I'll see you all in the spring, and have a good winter break. I think this was useful.
Thanks, everyone.
We had good participation today.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for having these. Usually I'm not able to join because I typically have a class, at least this semester I had a class from 12 to 1:30 during this time, but I always enjoyed watching the recordings.
Oh, good. I'm glad people watch the recordings.
Yeah, I did too. I had a class too, but I watched all the recordings when I could.
Oh.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
All right. Great. All right. I'll see you all.
Well, thank you, everyone. This recording will be sent out, and I guess everyone enjoy the snow day. Get some hot chocolate. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone have a good winter break.
If you're watching this on a recording, you actually watch all the way to the end. Send me an email with the subject Beyblades. That's the assessment for this test.
Do we win?
And Peter coming in with the pop quiz.
All right. I need to go check on my son and